Okay, so hi guys, hi all. We are happy to see you on our second session on Power BI on Air. And today, as usual, with us, Taras. Hi guys.
Hello, this is Budan.
And on this session, we are going to hear about the low-level security in Power BI.
So I guess today's speaker doesn't need any additional announcement, but let me just add a few sentences about him. So today we are happy to host Reza Rad. Reza is a Microsoft regional director, an author, trainer, speaker, and a consultant. So he is also Microsoft Data Platform MVP, co-founder of RADACAD. I guess a lot of you had a chance to read this blog. Reza is also a co-founder and co-organizer of the Difinity conference in New Zealand.
Yeah, thank you so much, Raza, to join us.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. Really appreciate that.
Cool. Thank you again. And one more note from our side. You can drop your question to using the chat on YouTube, and we will discuss in our Q&A session. So here we go. It seems we can start our presentation. So Raza, everything at your disposal.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. Really appreciate that. And thank you everyone for joining and watching this right now, whatever time it is for you. I'm Reza Rad. I'm author of some Power BI books and a coach and trainer consultant in Power BI area. My contact information is in the slides, and I'll make sure that I'll share it with you through Bhutan and Taras. They will probably add the links to the slide under the description in the YouTube channel. As they mentioned, if you have any questions, feel free to write it in the chat window. I'll get to those questions in some spots in middle of the presentation. I'm also author of a book called Role-Level Security in Power BI, which is kind of very related to this specific topic, and a video course on role-level security in Power BI as well, a full video course under that topic. Now let's jump into the role-level security topic itself. What is a role-level security? When I talk about it, a lot of people think role-level security is kind of like sharing who has access to the report. It's not like that. The role-level security is talking about sharing one report or one Power BI content, let's say, to a group of audience, but only they see their own data. They see the part of data that they are allowed to see. For example, salesperson of California would see California's information. Salesperson of Washington State will see Washington State's information. They will have different levels of access. Instead of me creating 4 or 5 different reports and giving them access to only part of data that they have using like filters, creating 5 different reports with 5 different filters, which cause a lot of maintenance problems. What we do, we normally define a role-level security. We define roles under that Power BI content. We say there's a role, for example, for sales manager of this region, for sales manager of that region, and then users would be able to see their own data. And why it is called role-level security, the reason is that the filter that we define is defined at the data row level. That is the only reason it is called like that. Now, to talk about that, the first example I'm going to show you is what we call as a static role-level security. And a static role-level security is a scenario that we define roles inside Power BI desktop. So here I have a Power BI desktop example. It's coming up. In this example, I'm going to have, here it is. So in this example, I have a couple of tables. These are for the Adventure Works sample. You can download all of these samples I'm showing to you. You can download them all from my blog in RADACAD. So I have a sales territory table. And that sales territory table has information such as like country and the regions. And then in the sales table, we have sales transactions, and there's a relationship between these two. So just to show you that what tables look like, sales territory table looks like this. I have country information such as United States, Canada, Germany, Australia, and things like that. This has a sales territory key, which then in the factory seller sales, alongside with all other information, one of the columns here is the sales territory key. Yeah, there's a column with that. I'm not going to just search and find it, but that is, yep, here it is. But that is a way that these two are related to each other, and we have the relationship already defined. Now, I also have a table here, a visual here. This visual shows all the countries. So here you see that we have like 6 countries and the sales amount in each country. The other one is a card visual showing the total sales amount. Now, if I want to share this with users, you normally publish it to the service or to the Power BI report server, whatever you are using for hosting your Power BI reports, and then share it with your end users. But if I share a report like this with my users, they will be able to see all of these different information for all of these different countries. What I want them to see is only to see the country that they are authorized to see. Someone, for example, from Canada should see Canada's information. Someone from UK should see UK's information. How can I do that? We can define that as a filter in our data set. Think about this 2 tables. When there's a relationship between these 2 tables, it means that if I filter this table, for example, I filter this table to be everything in Canada. As a result, that table would be also filtering for Canada. Why? Because we have this direction of relationship, which means the sales territory table can filter the factory seller sales table. Now, because I have this configuration, I can just filter this table and country information is in this table. Now, where should I define this filter criteria? That is here in the modeling tab. In the modeling tab, there's a section for security, which you can manage roles over here. Now, I can go and manage roles. And here, I already defined a couple of roles. I'm going to delete that, just creating it one more time so you can see how it is working. So there's no role at the beginning. I can go and create one. I'm going to call this, for example, Canada Sales Manager. I will see all the tables within my model, which I can go and add a filter on those. For example, in this case, you learned from that diagram I showed you that country should be filtered on this because that's one of the fields of this table. Now you can go ahead and write your filter criteria here, or you can click on these 3 dots, add a filter. This will show list of existing column and you can pick it from there, which is usually easier. So I'll go ahead and choose that. And I say country is equal, sales territory country is equal to value. Now I should replace this value with the value I want, in this case, Canada. It's not important if you do lowercase or uppercase because this is DAX expression and DAX is not case sensitive by default unless you use a specific functions to make it case sensitive. And verifying this, just creating one more role to be able to show you how it works. Another one is Australia, let's say sales manager. I define that too. Now I can go and copy the role from the previous one or create it again. If you want to copy, you can copy it just like this and then change this to be Australia. And we should do this practice for every role. For every role, we should go and create it. Like, for example, if I want to have 1 role per country, this example means that I should have defined like 6 different roles. But I keep it at 2 because this is explanatory enough how this is going to work. I save this after defining the roles, but still my report shows everything. always remember that Power BI Desktop is your developer environment. Inside the developer environment, you can't really see the effect of that. You can test it, but your view would be always the complete view. Your view would be always like everything. Now, if I want to test it, the way that I can test it is using this option. In the security, one is manage roles to define it. Another is view role, view as role, which is to test it. So here I can say view this as a role of Canada sales manager. And then Canada sales manager will see this. Despite the fact that total was like $80 million, Canada sales manager see $14 million in total and only Canada's sales. Or I can say view as, I choose Australia sales manager, and this would be Australia sales 1.59 million. And sometimes you might have one person with both roles. This means that this person would be able to see the total of these two and only these two countries, not other countries. Now, this is just for testing, for me to testing. I can stop watching here to see, to go back to the original view again. But this is just for my testing. Where do I define who is part of which role? That part is in Power BI website. In the Power BI website is a place that you go and say, for example, Mike is part of this role, Reza is part of another role, and things like that. So I need to publish it to the website. Now let me bring my Power BI website account over here. Now this also works with the report server. I get sometimes questions that does row level security works with the report server? Yep, absolutely, it does work with the report server. The only thing is that you publish the content in the report server. If it is dynamic row level security, your users might look a little bit different, but it works perfectly fine in the report server. Now I'm going to just delete the existing row level securities that I have and publish it again. And deleting this one. Okay, now I'm going back here. I'm publishing this Power BI report into the website. And you can publish it to a workspace and then share it using the Power BI apps on top of it, which is the proper way of doing it. For this example, however, I publish it only to my workspace. Anyone who has edit access on this content in the Power BI website would be able to see everything. This is only for read-only access that they will get the filter of row level security applied to them. So coming back here, now I see this is the report just published. I open that. Because I am the person who published this report, I'm the report owner. Report owner is like, let's say, able to see everything, like what you see here. I can see everything regardless of the row level security. I see all the countries because I have edit access in this report. Same happens if you publish the report in a workspace, and in that workspace, other users have edit access. As long as they have edit access, they will see everything. This row level security only works for read-only access. Now I can go to the data set related to this, because row level security configured at the data set level, not at the report level. Using view related, I see the data set. Here it is. Now, when I click on the three dots here, one of the options is security, which I go there. I see these couple of roles defined and any other roles if there was any. I can assign people to this. Now, this should be Office 365 groups, or if we are talking about report server, this should be AD groups, because that helps to manage these easier, like one AD group for Canada sales manager, one AD group for Australia sales manager, so that you can add and remove people from that group. But in this case, I'm just testing it, so I'm entering my username directly. So this is the other user I'm going to assign as the role of Canada sales manager. So whenever this user has access to this report, this user will see only Canada's sales. Now that is only if this user has access to the report. So I'm going to share this report too with that user. A simple basic sharing for now. And I'm going to open that account, that user account in another browser. I'll just bring that browser here. If you want to test row-level securities, one of the good ways is to have like a couple of accounts. You can still use that view as role, but if you really want to properly go to the website and test how it is working, that is a good way of doing it by having a couple of accounts and trying it out. Now it's coming up a little bit slow, the internet connection right now. As I mentioned, you can share this with publishing an app. You can share it with any other sharing methods except publish to web, because publish to web has no concept of end user row-level security. Doesn't really work with publish to web. So here I'm coming to this account and going to share it with me. I'll see this report shared just a minute ago from this user. I'll open that report. And because I'm only assigned to Canada's sales manager, I'll see only Canada. As you can see here, only Canada's sales, and this is the total sales. If I go to actual report over here, you see that the report is like all of these countries, but this user's view is only one country. Now, the thing is that because this is all defined in the data set, I can later on come here in the data set under security. I can, let's say, for example, promote this user to also have access to Australia's sales information. I don't need to share it again because this user already has access to the report. Now, if I refresh the user's view, Australia's data would come beside Canada's data, so the user has access to both. So really simple configuration to have your data filtered. I don't go and create like one report filtered for Australia, one report filtered for Canada, one report filtered for United States, because then every time I update the report, I have to go and update all of these again. I do one report, I build one report and filter it using row-level security. Now this, what you see right now is called static row-level security. Static row-level security is good for scenarios that you have only a few roles to define. In this example, I have like 6 countries to define roles for. I can define 6 roles. But imagine this scenario. Imagine that after a couple of weeks, this company started a branch in China. What should I do? I should come into the Power BI desktop, add a new role for China, like what we did here, add a new role for China, write the filter criteria for that, publish it, assign users to that role. What after a couple of weeks, what if we have a new branch in South Africa? Then same thing, come open the Power BI file, manage roles, add a new role, publish it, assign users to it. It requires maintenance, and that maintenance should be through opening my Power BI file. And normally your Power BI file is not like this simple, just with a couple of tables. You have much more tables and your model would be more complicated than this. So your logic is stored inside Power BI desktop file, and that is why we call it static row-level security, because I define the logic inside here. I said this role is filtered for Australia. I hard code this information over here. And that can work for scenarios like very few roles and very few changes. But what if I have requirement for too many roles? Like one of my clients came to me and said, I want to create like 1,500 roles. I said, why? He said, I'm building a Power BI report for HR system, or let's say for payroll system, part of that. And as part of that, I need everyone to see their own payroll information, but no others. So that means that I have to come here and define one role for every single user in that organization, and we have 1,500 users. That is not the right way of doing it, in fact, because if you have such thing in that scale, you shouldn't be doing it as a static row-level security, because you would definitely make mistakes, and creating 1,500 roles is not an easy job to do, even if there is an API to create. So what you should be doing in that case is to switch to something else. We call it dynamic row-level security. Now, dynamic row-level security, the difference of that with this is that in dynamic row-level security, to make changes, you don't need to open Power BI desktop. You store the logic of row-level security inside your data tables, inside your data models, inside the way that they are related to each other. That means if you later on wants to modify anything, you just go and add records to the tables. You don't need to open Power BI desktop. You just need to enter records into the tables or edit it, which can be done with anything such as like Power Apps or any other applications. You can directly go to, let's say, Excel or SQL Server, update those rows information or anything it is, right? So it is much easier to maintain dynamic row-level security. How does it work? Let me show you that. I don't see any questions, so I'll just continue on the next example. This is another Power BI file I'm opening. And in this file, I have a user table, which is basically the sales rep table. Every sales rep might have some sales transactions in the sales table. So here it comes. There are a couple of tables, as you can see, sales rep and sales transaction, and it is related based on the sales rep ID. Sales rep has records such as this, all the users in the organization, or the sales rep, let's say, in the organization, their ID, their name, and the email address. This is an important column. If I'm working with Power BI service, this would be like their email account, their Office 365 account when they log into the Power BI service. If I'm using Power BI report server, this should be their domain, their local domain account. Now you see here, my first account is not a Power BI account. And the reason for that is I'm using my local machine to test it out, which I'll show you how it works. Now, imagine this scenario. And here I have actually, let me delete this one. Here I have actually a table showing all the sales reps, their email information, the date of transaction, and their sales transaction. So I can see all the sales transactions. Now, what I want to happen is everyone to see their own sales transactions, but I don't want to go and create a role for Reza, a role for Leila, a role for Jack, because then I end up with creating 1,000 roles. I don't want to do that. There is a function in DAX called user principal name, which you can use to achieve or to get the logged in user information. So here I have defined that as a measure, making it bigger. It's a very simple function to use. There is no input, nothing at all. User principal name. I defined it as a measure. You don't really need to define a measure for that to get the row-level security working. I just did it so that I can show it to you how it is working. User principal name will give you the logged in information for the user into the hosting environment that Power BI is already hosted. Right now, the Power BI is hosted in my local machine inside Power BI desktop, which means if I bring that user principal name here, this shows me my local account because I logged in with my local account. This is my local machine and this is my local account. If I used my Office 365 account to log into this machine, this would have been something such as reza@radacad.com. And if we publish this into the Power BI website, this would be the login information that I use to log into Power BI website. If we publish this to Power BI report server, this would be the login that we use to log into the Power BI report server, right? So this would be getting the login from the user directly. Right? So when I know who logged into the system, then defining the filter criteria is simple. All I need to do is to say this column, the email column, should match that logged in name, which you can do that with this with this role. In this case, you just need one role, not more than that. One single role would do. So I defined one role, or let me do it one more time again so you can see how it is working. I create one role. You can call it anything. Because this is only one role, I'm going to call it user. Name doesn't really matter. And we need to filter the sales rep table. Why filtering the sales rep table? Because the email column is in the sales rep table. I can go ahead and choose the email column from the list here. And I can say email is equal to value, but what value? This value should be like Reza@radacad.com, Leila@radacad.com, whatever user login is, which means that user principal name. I can type that user principal name. It's not case sensitive. And I could have even used the measure directly here. I didn't do that because I want to show you that you don't really need the measure to get this working. This would work just fine without the measure, right? Validating it. So that's the only criteria that I have, this equal to user principal name, and that would automatically filter the other table. Now saving this, going to my report. Now, if I test it right now, if I go to view as role, sorry, modeling view as role. Right now, because this is my local user and I have a record for that, I will see this result. Now you see that why I defined my username in that table like that, so I can show it to you how it is working over here, right? So I'll do a stop viewing. Now, because I want to test it in the website, what I'll do is I'll open the file that I'm using as source for this, which is this Excel file. And I'm going to change it to my Office 365 account, saving it. Now I'm going to use that because this might not be pointing to that file. I'm going to point to that file in the data source setting. This is where you can change the data source of your Power BI file. I'm changing it, refreshing it just right now. And I should see that email, right? Now, if I publish this solution into the Power BI website, and this source file, which you have seen is an Excel file right now, this can be anything. It can be SQL Server, it can be Command Data Services, it can be anything you are more comfortable with. If you do it as a Command Data Services, that means then you can have Power Apps working with that. With Power Apps, you can enter data into that. So publishing it up to the website, going to the website and opening that report. Here it is. Now, when I open this report, again, remember, I'm the owner of the report. I will see everything. Now you see this is changed, this account. It was my local account in Power BI Desktop. Now it is a different account. This is the account that I used to log in here. You see, this is exactly the same account. Now, I'm going to set up the roles, set up the user's assignment to the roles, which I'll do that in the dataset. Under the settings, sorry, under the security, wrong button. View related, I'll go under the security. Now I see there's only one role. Now what you should be really doing in this stage is not to assign like user one by one here. You should create a group, Office 365 group or AD group, you call it everyone, and bring everyone within your organization into that group, add them all into that group, then just assign that group to this user because they will see only their own data. If they don't have a record in that table, they don't see anything, right? There is nothing to be worried about if you are adding people to that role. Right now, again, because this is just for a test, I'm not working with groups. I'm just assigning my own user directly here, save. And I'm going to share this report also with my user. Again, this should be shared with that group. So sharing with that user. Now bringing the other account under shared with me, I see this dynamic sample is just shared with me right now. Okay, not a feedback just right now. And clicking on this, and this will open, and I can see this is my account that I logged in, this account, and I see only my own transactions, where the actual data is like 4 records. I see only 2 transactions which belongs to me. If Layla logs in, she will see her own transaction. If Jack's logged in, he will see his own transaction. All of that happened with one single role. When I look at the role again, one single role, and with this simple criteria saying that email is equal to user principal name. This is dynamic role level security. Why? Because if later on I want to authorize someone on this, I don't need to come here and edit anything. All I need to do is to add a record in this table. Like, for example, if we have a new user in organization, we need to have that record added in our table, which this can be done through like opening that Excel file in my case. If it is sourced in like other places such as SQL Server, CDS, or anything like that, you can directly edit it over there, or you can have like apps on top of it which edits it. Another thing is that you can also populate this table using things such as get data from Active Directory. That is one of the questions I normally get, that what if I want to get all users which get data from Active Directory? If you have enough privilege, you would be able to see you would be able to get all of those active data. You can use PowerShell scripts also to extract those in a CSV format, then have a Power BI file getting data from those. So there are ways to automate even that process, so you don't really even need to touch this at all. This would work just fine. Now, this is called dynamic role level security, a little bit more to implement, but easier to maintain. I still see no questions. If you have any questions, feel free to write it in the chat window. I'll just continue. Oh, yeah, one question just came up. What about Power BI embedded? How does that work with RLS? You can have RLS in Power BI embedded, like what you have in here. The difference is, however, in Power BI embedded, the users might be users of your web portal. Like if I host this report inside a web portal, then I have like different users. I do not have Power BI users. Like it's not Reza Rad RADACAD logging in. It's probably like a different user account. Your web application is responsible to pass their user information into this. And when that information passed, you can still get the same thing. So here you would still have the user principal name, everything would work, but the user principal name would be passed from your web application to this. So dynamic role level security, static role level security, all of that would work in Power BI embedded as well. Only part of this should be done in your web application to pass that details down. And that is one of the reasons why it doesn't work with publish to web, because in the publish to web area, there is no concept of a user. So you can't really have it filtered by a user. Okay, any other questions? Say I work in a team region. I want to see my data and that of my team. Great one. So that is leading us to the next example. So let me close this one. Now, when it comes to role level security, dynamic role level security especially, things are not always that simple that you have a user table and a sales table. Things can get complicated. There are like different patterns that your tables are related to each other. You might not have 2 tables, you might have 20 tables, you might have different requirements, like what we already had as a question. What if I want to have a manager level access? What if I want everyone to see their own data, but as a manager, I want to see everyone's data? Consider it as like a flat structure. What if I have users and profiles? Like many-to-many scenario. Let's say I don't have one sales rep for California. I have like 10, 5, 15 different sales reps in California. What if I have, let's say, one person being sales rep of multiple regions? So this creates like a many-to-many scenario. How does that work in this, let's say, dynamic role-level security rules? Or organizational hierarchy. I want everyone to see their own data, the manager to see everyone's under that hierarchy, and higher level manager again under that hierarchy, like a real hierarchy of organization, and everyone see their own data. And things can get even more complicated when you combine like users and profile with organization hierarchy. So it gets many-to-many and organizational hierarchy. There are many different patterns. I'm just going to show you, let's say, one of these at the moment. And the one that I'm going to talk about is manager level access. Now, I have exactly the same data model, like those two tables that we had. We still have that. I'm going to open that in a second. I have exactly those two tables. Now, the thing is that this time I'm going to add a manager level access. Now, what I mean by the manager level access, so everyone would be able to see their own data, like what you have seen in the previous example. But in addition to that, I want managers to see everyone's data. I still have those two tables. Let me make it bigger. Yep, I still have those two tables, the sales rep and the sales transactions. Going to view roles. Now, I'm just first explaining how this might work. So you already know that for the user role, you can do something like this. You can have something that says email is equal to user principal name, right? You already know that from the previous example. But now we want to add manager to this. If I want to add manager to this, does that mean I need to create another role? Let's try that. If I create another role and if I call it manager, and again, consider this is like a very flat structure. Everyone is employee. We have like one manager, right? That manager will see everyone, right? We'll start simple. Now, if I have a manager role, what should I define as a filter criteria for this manager to be able to see everything? I want to say the manager should see everything. What should I write here? This is a DAX expression that you write here. Some people say I write all, something like that, because that will bring like everything, ignoring filter context. The thing is that whatever you write in this expression should return a true false. It is actually explaining it to you here. This is a conditional expression box. Whatever you write here should return true or false. If it returns true, that means having access. If it returns false, means not having access. So I can, if I want this role to have access on everything, I can write true, just like that. Or I can write a condition that returns true, 1 = 1, or anything like that. Or I can't even not write anything. If you don't write any filters on your tables, all of your tables are unfiltered, that means this user will see everything. But for some people, this might be a little bit confusing when they come and see there is a role with no filter criteria. Does it mean this role has access to everything or doesn't have access to everything? So I personally prefer to come here and say something like this, right? Anyway, if we do that, if we create a role like this, is this going to be really a dynamic role-level security? Not really when you think about it, because we have created that logic again inside Power BI Desktop. The whole concept of dynamic role-level security was to not to do that, right? Was to not come and manage anything like that. What if after a couple of months we realize that now we need to add like a mid-level manager, something like that? I should come here, define another role. So I'm actually moving towards static role-level security, which is not a great thing to do. Best dynamic role-level security is a configuration managed all through one user account. You should one actually role. You shouldn't be more. You shouldn't have more than one role. You should minimize the amount of maintenance on your Power BI file. So I'm going to remove this manager role. So if I'm removing this manager role, how can I write an expression here that tells me if it is manager, we'll see everything. If it is not manager, we'll see only things like that. I need to actually write an if expression, something like that. I'm just writing it as a pseudo code for now. Then I'll explain how it works. I should write something like this. If this is actually a pseudo code right now. If it is manager, see everything, right? Else, see their own data, right? This is not really a DAX code. This is like a pseudo code just to give you an idea of what it should look like, right? So I should write an expression like this, a DAX expression like this. When it comes to dynamic row level security, you're being comfortable writing DAX expression defines how powerful you can write a dynamic row level security. So I need to write a condition like that. I have, now let me cancel this. I'm not going to use that. I have a field in my table called is manager. I define that field so that from the table, I can control who is manager, who is not manager. This is 0 or 1, right? So what I can do in this case is to first find out who logged in. Let's say Reza at RADACAD.com, then check, is this person a manager or not? And then I can have that expression. I can say if this person is manager, which means if is manager is 1, give access to everything. If it is not manager, then just his own information, right? So how can I do that? How you can realize who logged into the system? You already know that that is user principal name. Then how you would be able to get the is manager information of that user? That is using of some DAX functions. And you can do that with filter function combined with some iterators. You can use it with lookup value. There are a bunch of different ways of doing it. I'm going to show you one of these ways. Now, right now I have this measure, user equal to user principal name. You already know how does it work. I'm going to just create another measure. And again, I'm creating the measure just to show you how things are working. So I'm going to call this is manager check, right? Now I can use lookup value function. And lookup value is a function that works like a select statement if you come from SQL background. If you come from Excel background, it's looking up for a value inside a table based on a criteria. You see the logic of that function here. So it tells me what is the result column name I want. So after this lookup, what column I want to fetch the information. I want to get the is manager column result as a result of that. Now, what column I'm searching into? I'm searching into the username, into the email column, right? An email column should be equal to what value? To the value of the user logging into the system, which is user principal name, right? Again, if you come from SQL background, you can read it like this. Select is manager field, where email field equals user principal name. If you come from Excel background, this is searching in that table for the record that email address is equal to user principal name. And when it finds that record, it brings the is manager column out of that, right? Lookup value is not the only way to achieve this. You can use it with filter function, with some other functions. This is only one of the ways. When it comes to DAX, there are tons of different methods you can achieve one result. So I'll bring that into here as a card visual. Now you see it blank. Now, why it is blank? You see that in my table, actually, the username is like this. And my local username, you already learned that my local username is not that. My local username is this. So what I'm going to do is just to go to that data source, again, Excel file, and I'm going to write my local my local username here. It is actually my local username, so it is not probably connected to this as a source. So let me just update my source here. Change source. And I'm going to use this source over here. Close. Apply changes. Now this means that this would be that user information. And I'm checking that file one more time. In that file, you see that my account is not really a manager. You see this is 0, right? Layla's account is a manager, and it tells me the right thing. Is manager check based on that criteria told me that Reza is not a manager. Now I'm just going to change that to become manager. That's how easy it is to become manager in our company. So I become a manager. I come here. I refresh this. This should return 1 now. Right? So I found a way to find, am I a manager or not? Now, what my row-level security rule should look like, it's just an if statement wrapping around this. I should say if this whole thing is 1, then I'm a manager, right? Now I'm just typing something like this, manager, right? If it is not, employee. Right? This at the moment returns only text, right? But I'm going to use the same logic inside my row-level security criteria. So this realized that I'm a manager based on my login. So what I'll do is I'll copy this expression now. I'll go to manager roles here. I'll create a role. Again, I need only one role, calling it user role. What my role criteria would be, I just paste that expression over here. The difference is that this expression should not return text. This expression should return a true false. Now, coming back here, if it is employee, what should I do if it is employee? If it is employee, I want the email field to be equal to user principal name, like what we had before. That is if it is employee. If it is not employee, it is manager. I want the manager to see everything. And you already know see everything means true, right? So I used that logic and I brought more logic into that using this DAX expression. So all of this is saying that if it is manager, access to everything, otherwise access to his or her own data. Now I'm saving it just to show you how it is working. Saying view as roles, my user right now is manager. You see everything is possible to see. Now I demote myself, like how is it easy to become manager? It is also that easy to become not a manager. So I save it again and I refresh it here. Now my account is not a manager, is an employee, and you see I only see my own transactions. When it becomes a manager again, and I can have 2 managers, there's nothing wrong with that. When I become a manager again, this would show me everything. You see, this is a true dynamic row-level security. I just changed the source and everything impacted with that. With one single role, everything works. Now, this is talking about a flat structure. Hierarchical scenario is a little bit different again. Okay, now let me see if there is any questions on this. Does RLS work on tab level? I guess by tab level, Emil, you mean the page, like row-level security on this page, on that page. Unfortunately, not right now, unless you go and create totally different reports, like a set of reports for those who have access to this, a set of reports for those who have access to these. Otherwise, you can't really do that. There is no row-level security on the visual level in Power BI yet. Hopefully, it will become available at some point, but not now. Another question, how does row-level security work with Power Apps? Not exactly sure what do you mean by that. You can use Power Apps to control a table like this, to control your roles table, something like a table like this. Your Power Apps can enter data into this table or edit data into the table. But if you mean seeing the filtered data in Power Apps, that's not my specialty. That is more like a Power Apps question. Unfortunately, I'm not the best to answer that. Another question from Prashant. I want to compare my sales to the average of the team, but also the average of all other teams. How can I do RLS? Very good question. That is one of the patterns I'm not going to talk about today, but I'm giving you like a highlight. How does it work? So if I want to consider this example, if I want to compare like everyone's sales with the total, one of the ways that I can do that is to have a table that is not getting filtered with this table, because right now I'm defining my row-level security criteria in the sales rep, and that will filter this table. I need to have another table. This can be like a reference from this table in Power Query, aggregated at the sales rep level, which means that this will not get filtered by the sales rep. It will be only date and the sales amount, right? It might get filtered by the date table, but it doesn't get filtered by the sales rep. And that aggregation can be done in Power Query using group by, or you can do that with other methods. Then I bring that doesn't get filtered by sales rep. That means that will show the total or the average. I can write some measures that give me the total or average on that. That doesn't get filtered by row-level security. And it shows the high-level values. For example, it shows that total sales is like $10 million, but it doesn't that $10 million. So there's no security breach in that as well. Then you have your sum of sales from this table divided by sum of sales from the other table. I have actually a blog post and video exactly about how such a method would work to compare to the total. A question from Donald, lots of RLS. Okay, that's not a question, thank you. Another question, what if we have multiple managers having different list of employees? Yes, that is the hierarchical employee structure. I can explain that in a second as well. A question from Prashant, or a measure with cross filter? No, that doesn't work. If I change this to be both directional, that still is not going to help, because I'm going to filter this table using row-level security. Remember, when user come to this table is already filtered. Doesn't matter if you write a measure with cross filter or anything else, because this is already filtered, right? What you are going to do when this is filtered, that is filtered. Unless you make this like an inactive relationship, only filter it with a specific criteria using specific things. Again, that won't be the ideal method. I would say best would be like to have a separate table aggregated level. Now, because we had some questions about organizational hierarchy, let me explain that a little bit as another pattern. Another pattern is now a little bit different. Let's say, what if I have, and I'm going to show you this as the last example. I'm not going to show you the entire example. I'm just showing you the pre-built one because it takes a little bit of time to build it. Let's say I have an organizational hierarchy scenario, which means that I want everyone to see, let me bring that again. I want everyone to see their own data. Like when Bill logs in, Bill should see his own information. But if Mark logs in, Mark should see himself and Bill. If Layla logs in, Layla should see all of these 4 people, right? It's like a proper hierarchical structure. Now I'll open a file that has those information. That would be this file. Again, all of these files are already available in my blog. And go and check RADACAD blogs. There are tons of different row-level security examples, and in the book that I mentioned and the video course. Okay, now it's opening. Yep, here it is. So I have used a hierarchy slicer here to show the organizational chart, right? Not sure why the hierarchy slicer shows things like this. It's supposed to be showing it a little bit better. But anyway, this is showing it just like that. Now, I have two tables, sales transaction and a user table. Now, a user table looks like this. Don't look at those columns for now, just look at these columns. A user table looks like this. Everything is what you have seen before. The only difference is that I have manager ID. It's not is manager because we don't have one manager. We might have multiple managers. So how does it work? This is a hierarchy inside this table. For example, Lindsay is employee number 8. Manager of Lindsay is employee number 5, which then points back to another record in this table. Employee number 5 is Amy. Manager of that is employee number 1, which points back to another record in this table. And this employee doesn't have a manager, right? And this hierarchical levels might go for like 10 levels, 15 levels, or 2 levels. It can be totally variable. How does this work when you are implementing row level security? When Reza log in, I want Reza to be able to see all of these. But when Lindsay log in, Lindsay should see only her own part. When Amy logs in, Amy should see Amy and Lindsay. How all of that would work? Again, everything would work based on the DAX expression behind the scenes. So here I have a column, a calculated column using path function. Path is a set of one of the set of functions. We call it parent-child functions. Path function will give me the entire hierarchy. Very simple function to use. I just say, this is the user ID, this is the manager ID. This will give me the entire hierarchy. For Lindsay, Lindsay is employee number 8, manager of that employee number 5, manager of that employee number 1. And you see that employee number 1 is in some of these hierarchies. So my job then in row level security would be first finding out, for example, who logged in, Reza@radacad.com, what is the ID of that person, and then finding all rows with that ID included, right? This is like a text. You can go and search in that text, but there's a function for that. You don't really need to do that. You can use path contains function. So my criteria here is just as simple as this. I'm using a path contains function. Now here I used a max filter, which is kind of equivalent of the lookup method that you have seen. This is just another way of doing it. All of this part is just fetching the user ID. When I fetch the user ID, I check which path contains this user ID using this, right? And as a result, this means that when the user log in, they will be able to see their own information. Now, again, to test it and see how it is working, I'm going to connect it to the source I have for this example. Change source. Mentioning again all of these examples. I have blogs, videos about this, and you can download it from our blog. So apply changes. Okay, now you see this is the entire hierarchy, right? My user account should be different. No, it is not. So I'm going to just update it. So I'm going to use this local account, refresh it. This should get updated with my new account. Okay, yep, it is fine. Now I see everything because I'm not looking at the role level security view. When I go to view as, and when I choose that role, I would be able to see only my own hierarchy. I don't see others' information, and all of that happens with that row level security criteria. The row level security criteria can get a little bit more complicated. I didn't talk about this pattern, for example, users and profile. When you have many-to-many scenario, many-to-many scenario doesn't work properly with the row level security because your user table gets filtered, but doesn't get your profile table filtered because of the direction of relationship. Many people go and just change this to be both directional. That brings a really big performance impacts, and it's not recommended. I don't recommend using that. I do recommend, however, filtering the profile table, and I have an example, a blog video about that, how to do that. So without having both directional relationship, this would work just fine. Or what if you have organizational hierarchy and many-to-many together, right? That would require a little bit longer DAX code, but everything is possible. In the realm of role-level security, there is nothing impossible. It's only your ability to write DAX expression that makes it impossible. Now, checking a few more questions before jumping to the end. And before I close this, as I mentioned, all of these are available in my blogs. I have a course, video course, and a book, role-level security book available on that, the only role-level security book in Power BI you can find at the moment. And you can access my video trainings as well as 190 hours plus of video training in RADACAD Academy membership with this $30 first month membership discount code. Try to use it. Okay, now let's check some of the questions from Emil. If I have an app that consists of multiple reports and each report has different role-level security, how does it work? Is there app RLS which then override the individual report RLS? You should not combine RLS logic in like a spread, let's say that's a better word. You should not spread RLS logic level across everywhere, right? If you are defining RLS logic, like defining any other logics, keep it only in one place. I'd say keep your RLS logic inside your Power BI data model, which is the best, using that dynamic role-level security. Then your app would be only responsible to pass that information, right? And when the app passes that information, your Power BI decide what this person is authorized to see. If this person is authorized to see different things, then authorize it in different ways. You can still manage that scenario of having different apps, different RLS. That would be the same concept of users and profile that I mentioned. I haven't showed you the example for that, but that would be exactly like that. Go and check out my users and profiles example. You see how the many-to-many scenario would work. Another question from Aziz. Could you please provide the links from your blogs? Just go to our blog to radacad.com, search for role-level security. You'll find dozens of posts about that, all of them available. Please share the Power BI of the hierarchy. Yep, all of those files are available over there. I guess that's pretty much all the questions. And if you have any questions that you didn't get answer for that, I'm a role-level security enthusiast person. Feel free to reach out to me, send your questions. That might worth another blog article to come out for everyone to learn in the future as well. Thank you. Oh, yeah, one more question, Ashraf. Oh, good to see you here, Ashraf. How to handle RLS for anyone who has direct report in the hierarchy, regardless of their level in the hierarchy? Not exactly sure what you mean. If you mean people should only see their direct reports, not like just first level, not anyone in the second level, that is also handleable. You need to combine path contains with something like that. There is like path item, which you can choose the level. You can say path item level 1, level 2, level 3, things like that. So you can first find out what the level is for that user, then only give those users with one level down. Things are possible. You need to just tweak that DAX statement a little bit to get it working. Is book available in Amazon? Yes, it is. Okay, that's pretty much me. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Any last words? Tars,
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much. Wow, this was so great presentation, and it seems to me there's really demand on the market right now. Thank you for the Q&A session on the spot. It was really cool. And it seems to me, guys, this is all for today. And any last word from your eyes?
No, everything good. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. Really appreciate that.
Thank you so much again. And as usual, guys, we'll prepare for you a lot of interesting presentation and technically savvy speakers in the future.
Yes, thank you everyone. Reza, it was a great presentation. We had a lot of questions. I hope it was very useful and interesting for everyone. So don't forget to subscribe to our channel not to miss any interesting things. And you can also join our LinkedIn group that is in the subscription of the video. And thank you everyone. Have a nice day.
Thank you all. Be smart and safe.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.